helping with board meetings moving forward too.
Very good.
Then you just hit go live and we're live.
Thanks,
Okay.
Emily and Amy.
That's great. Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Board of Directors meeting for the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority for November. It's we've had a little taste of winter last week, and looks like it's going to be a little nicer in the coming days. So, but winter is definitely at hand. So, just quick reminder that have your chat and your participant windows open. Try to use the raised hand feature, and we have Emily and Amy helping us out today. So if you have any issues, get a hold of them and they'll help you out. Again, reminder that our meeting is being live streamed and on our YouTube channel, and that's part of our requirement to allow public viewing of the proceedings. And we do have regrets today from Nancy Manning. And with that, I am going to ask Michelle to do the roll call, please, for attendance.
Mary Blosh,
Present.
Anna Hopkins,
Here.
Tony Jackson,
Here.
Sandy Levin,
Here.
Margaret Lupton,
Here.
Hugh McDermott,
Here.
Paul Mitchell,
Here.
Anna Marie Murray, okay. Brian Petrie,
Present.
Jim Ruffle,
Here.
Joe Salter,
Here.
Mark Schadenberg,
Here.
Alex Westman, and Alan Dale.
Present.
So it looks like we're missing Anna Marie and Alex.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Michelle. All right, so we'll begin today's meeting with our First Nation territorial greeting. We will begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lunapiaq peoples, who have long-standing relationships to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation at Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island. Next item we have is the modifications to the agenda. I would like to point out that there was one error in the agenda as circulated. Report number 6.3. And that is, it should be a motion to approve the recommendation as presented in the report, not that the board receives report for information. So it's one for making sure that we approve the recommendation as presented in the report. So with that, anything else for modifications to the agenda? Sandy, I think you had one.
Yes, I'd like the board to consider 6.3 regarding Bill 23 as the first item.
Okay, so Sandy is moving that we deal with report number 6.3, and then we can deal with 6.1 and 6.2. Would somebody like to second that change?
I can second that, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Brian. Okay. So the motion is just that we reverse the order there and we deal with item 6.3 before the two reports. I'll call for the vote then on that that modification to the agenda. And Michelle, if you could do the roll call, please.
Mary Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Ruffle,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Anyone have anything else then for modifications to the agenda? I'm not seeing or hearing anything. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Do any of the board members have any declarations to make for today's meeting? I'm not seeing or hearing anything. We have nothing today under presentations or delegations. That takes us down to item number 5, which is administrative business. Item number 5.1 is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. That was back on October 26, 2022. And the motion there is that we approve the Board of Directors minutes from October 26th, including any closed session minutes. I don't believe we have Alex with us at all. So if I could get maybe Brian to move that and Marie to second it, please.
So moved.
And seconded.
Good, thank you. Any comments, questions, any errors or omissions on the motion to approve the minutes? I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so if everyone's okay, I will call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Item 5.2, I don't believe there's any business arising from the minutes. And item 5.3, we have no correspondence for today's meeting. So we move along to item number 6, which is reports for consideration. And the first report then, we will move down and deal with 6.3. This is the Omnibus Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act. Nancy's away here, so if I could get Tony to move this and Hugh to second it, please.
So moved. So seconded.
Okay, thank you. So, as we were discussing before the meeting got started there informally, Bill 23 has been another item that we are dealing with here. It's kind of caught the CAs and municipalities a little bit off guard. It's the day after the municipal election that the provincial government suddenly introduced some more changes. It's becoming a real routine here that we've been dealing with a number of changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the way that the conservation authorities do business. And this is just the latest. So lots going on. And unfortunately, it seems like, as I said, the timing here is a little bit disappointing. And the fact that AMO was not allowed an opportunity to present at the standing committee. We're hopeful that there will be some changes, but it certainly doesn't look like we're heading in that direction just because of the way this is being unfolded. So I'll turn it over to Tracy for some more comments. Tracy?
Thank you, Alan. Through you. I'll also point out that the Ontario Professional Planning Institute was also not given an opportunity to speak at standing committee. And given that the changes in this bill are so much about planning in Ontario, both how it affects our municipalities and planning as a profession, I think that speaks volumes where the standing committee chose not to have those voices speak and see those and understand, I guess, those unintended consequences. But substantial changes are being proposed as outlined in the report, as alluded to, certainly the Conservation Authorities Act, but also a number of other postings that also impact how conservation authorities are engaged in environmental planning in Ontario. So there's proposed updates to the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, that would significantly reduce the protections on significant wetlands, not allowing as many wetlands in our watershed being identified as significant. There's another proposal about conserving Ontario's natural heritage that introduces the idea of offsetting and compensation for those features that are lost. Certainly in some situations, offsetting is appropriate, but the worry is that this will be much more widespread and have more environmental impacts. And then as well, there's a discussion paper regarding the Section 28 regulations. They're now calling it the Regulation of Development for the Protection of People and Property from Natural Hazards in Ontario. So the report outlines kind of our general comments and high-level review of those, while staff will be providing more detailed kind of line-by-line input into some of the more challenging aspects of the legislation as it's worded, and some inputs on some of those discussion papers and other changes that are yet to come. It's been introduced that the provincial policy statement will also be updated. So lots of moving parts here, I guess is the best way to describe it. But in our watershed, ultimately these changes will do little to expedite the approval processes and reduce costs. Instead, conservation authorities, we're able to provide efficiencies reviewing applications. We're already looking at them from a natural hazard standpoint. Natural heritage is often an overlay in those same areas. Those areas have been protected because there's hazard components to those features, such as wetlands. And in many cases, our municipalities, all except London, do not have any staff expertise in-house to be able to provide those types of comments from our ecologists, our biologists, our aquatic ecologists as well. So not to mention the hydrology of these features and areas too. So certainly in our watershed, it's a little bit unique too, because many of those services we provide, we're providing to the upper tier county level that provide those services on behalf of their area municipalities. So we have been providing our comments to date, passing our concerns along to our upper tier municipalities. They too are writing council reports and informing their new councils about these changes and how it will impact planning. So making sure that there's a true understanding of all of these, what we're saying are unintended consequences by these significant changes. So certainly what we're most concerned about is the environmental losses throughout the watershed. We are still required to comment and review planning applications for hazards. Certainly some municipalities are still wanting information to inform their decision-making about natural heritage in their municipalities, and having that information, again, we still need that staffing complement to provide that. But it will certainly, in our view, see tremendous environmental changes that will be very challenging in future years for us to achieve our environmental targets and for municipalities to mitigate climate change. So just wanted to give a little bit more background of kind of the broader picture on how we see it influencing our authority business. And certainly the report's been provided, and between Jenna and I, we can answer any questions you have. Oh, Alan, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that, folks. Thank you, Tracy, for those comments. And certainly a part of this recommendation, there is a draft letter there to be signed by myself and Brian, and very similar to the letter that was put out by Halton. And I thought that was an excellent letter that is being sent out by some of their board members. So I'll open up for questions and comments, and Brian, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Two things. One, obviously, I don't know if we're even going strong enough in what we're saying in our letter about the importance of these changes, not only towards the Conservation Authority, but also as planning as a whole in this province. Two, I have been extremely proud of the amount of knowledge that has been flexed by the people, planners, staff, everybody in Ontario that has something to do with the changes to Bill 23, the knowledge that has been shared, the amount of just unbelievable talent, really fighting against this bill, of showing how misunderstood the government has of what planning is in Ontario. It's been impressive. I don't know what the board's feeling is about having a stronger letter, about condemning the legislation, about at least I want to make sure that we ask for a longer, that they defer the timelines to a longer date. That's a common one that I'm seeing in a lot of legislation, in response letters, just to have more time to get our heads wrapped around what the budget implications can be, and staffing levels, that sort of thing. I know we're not facing as much because they're asking to reduce what we do, but yeah, how's it going to work with future planning if this goes through? That's my major concern, is that from a municipal level and from a conservation level, how does this system work to provide this the level of planning that the people of Ontario expect when it comes to planning matters? And then I'll leave that open to discussion.
Okay. Thank you for those comments, Brian, and we'll get some input from others. Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. I understand from reading the Globe and Mail this morning that there were some proposed changes to the bill already tabled before the standing committee. Was there anything related to conservation authorities in that we're aware of?
Tracy, have you got any input on that?
Yes, through the chair, standing committee was receiving proposed amendments yesterday afternoon. I was kind of having it on my phone, listening for when it was coming up. So any of the proposed changes made by the NDP or Liberal representatives in standing committee had been not carried. So we haven't seen any amendments at standing committee, and the next step will be to go back to the legislature. So Jenna, do you recall when the legislature is in session again regarding the bill? I don't recall right off the top of my head. Again, commenting period for the bill remains until the 24th. So when standing committee was hearing and debating, it doesn't align with when the RO postings end for commenting. So,
Okay.
do you remember?
Yeah, sorry, Tracy, through you, Chair. I don't have that date either.
Okay, that's fine. Any follow-up, Sandy?
Yeah, certainly. What if the bill passes before the new board takes office? Are we expecting some of these changes, particularly to do with fee schedules, to be in place immediately, or will it all be set out in regulations that usually take time? Does staff have any handle on that yet?
Yes, through the chair, Sandy. Certainly we're aware that the ability for the minister to freeze any increases in fees is expected to take effect January 1st. With regard to some of the processes for exemptions under the Conservation Authorities Act for specified municipalities, that's still to come through future regulation. Again, by the time a regulation is drafted and posted, we're not anticipating that to happen immediately. I think typically we're seeing new regulations pass January 1st or mid-year, July 1st. So July 1st would probably be the earliest, and potentially not until the end of the year. So, so yeah, there's some of those things that could influence how fees are collected, how processes occur. But it's unlikely that would happen in 2023. And if it did, it would be very much later on through our processes. We have captured in our fee schedule a note to suggest that if there is an exemption, that through the planning process where a permit is not required. Our anticipation is that it would be through a site plan control where our typical conditions through a permit could be incorporated into site plan agreements. But in that case, that work would still be required by our regulation staff to make sure that those conditions align with what our permit requirements would typically be and requirements for monitoring and such, that that staff time be captured through an additional fee by doubling the plan review fee for that type of application. So that, again, we're just kind of forecasting out what might be, but we haven't seen those regulations yet. And depending on how quickly the province gets to writing those regulations and we see where those exemptions apply, it might not even apply to our watershed, but just being a little bit cautious to not with that uncertainty.
Okay, changing subjects a little bit on the bill, the concern are as you said, London has staff to do most of this work, but many of the other municipalities in the watershed don't. And it seems on my reading of the bill that we'd be prevented from being retained in any way, shape, or form from a municipality, or is it a contract with a municipality? Do you have any clarity on that at this point?
Tracy?
Yes, through the chair to Sandy. The language that's being proposed is that the CAs would not be able to comment on applications. So again, what commenting is, the question arises then how municipalities making decisions when the CAs have information and expertise to share. Is it a change in language in that we provide advisory data and information to municipalities to inform their decision making? Or is it a separate contract agreement with municipalities where it's a sharing of staff? These are some of the types of ideas that have been floated around because we have had municipalities like the County of Oxford very concerned with this type of limitation being placed on our role. They value the comments that they are receiving from conservation authorities now and estimate that they would require another 3 full-time equivalents to be able to undertake that role that we're able to provide at a fraction of those costs. So how that might work, we're not certain. Again, it will come back to what is intended by commenting. Is that formal commenting or is it provision of information to inform decision making, whereas not a formal commenting rule through the planning process?
Just kind of a comment, Alan, is hopefully those members of this board who sit on Oxford County Council will include in their letter to the minister and the premier perhaps the unintended consequence here of hamstringing municipalities' ability to provide good service. Finally, I know in the past we've asked the City of London for a business case to hire planners at our end to be able to process more quickly London applications. Would this bill prevent that from happening as well?
Through the chair to Sandy, depends on what it is. It wouldn't hamper it for natural hazard commenting. That is still very clearly the role of CAs, is to provide that hazard commenting. I would say that City of London's processes for business cases for assessment growth funding has changed a little bit since those early applications to make it harder for, I'll call them the softer services, to be funded through assessment growth. Instead, it's more about those hard services with extending the requirements for more garbage pickup, more recycling pickup, longer roads to maintain, that side of things. There's the assessment growth fund has been, I guess, oversubscribed. So with that, again, it comes back to, it is certainly making it difficult to have agreements with municipalities for what we were calling Category 2 services. These were provisions of planning comments that municipalities were requesting because it's something that they are required to provide. It's not an optional item. Municipalities must provide planning comments in all areas of the provincial policy statement to make decisions. But this certainly flies in the face of those earlier directions through our mandatory programs and services regulation, where now it's specifically excluded.
Sorry, Ellen, there is one more thing I'd like to jump in on. Is that
Okay. Yep.
that was mentioned is you're right, the province is looking at potentially changes to the provincial policy statement. And that commenting period's not till December 30th. Is that tied to this bill? And the reason I'm asking the question is because if they change the principal policy statement, it really makes a significant problem for everybody. And is Conservation Ontario and to the best of your knowledge, AMO commenting on that too, so that we get some consultation before they put something in writing in a bill?
Yeah,
Tracy?
through the chair again. It's not really part of the bill itself, from my understanding. Jenny can clarify for sure, but it's certainly part of this suite of items that have been proposed through the bill that are now this trickle effect, where comments are being requested at this time on the environmental registry postings on potential changes to the PPS that would allow for faster approvals. So we haven't even seen kind of a draft of what's being proposed. Instead, this is just a open commenting period on changes that, you know, anyone feels would better improve growth. But it's some concern has been raised that we might only just see a new provincial policy statement, and this will be considered the commenting period for those changes.
Okay, so I mean, what I'm worried about with that is, do you need some sort of authority from this board to be able to comment in case something happens before we're formally convened again as a board? Because that could happen very quickly, given the province's history of moving quickly on things without consultation. So do we need to make some sort of motion, added recommendation here that we give you authority in consultation with the chair and vice chair to write the province as necessary regarding changes to the provincial policy statement that may affect the natural heritage policies contained within?
Yeah, you know, I hadn't considered how quickly this province might move towards that, or if there'll even be an opportunity for comment, but certainly in the event that may arise, a recommendation would be helpful.
I'd like to add that, Mr. Chair, to the recommendations that are on this, that are before us.
Okay. I don't know if Michelle got the wording there or all, or if you could kind of repeat it for Sandy, or? Yeah,
that the board asked the general manager in consultation with the chair and vice chair to write the province if there are changes in the provincial policy statement proposed to affect the work of the Conservation Authority.
Okay. You got that, Michelle, then?
I got up until, sorry, up until if there are changes to the provincial policy statement.
That affect the work of the Conservation Authority.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's been moved as an amendment. Would someone like to second that amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I see a bunch of hands. I wasn't sure who had hands up already for speaking or who for seconding, but thank you. We got Joe to second that. Okay, so Now we need to deal with the amendments. So is there anybody who would like to speak to the amendment? I've got about 5 hands up, but I think they were all up previously. So Anna, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sandy, for bringing this forward. There's so much uncertainty going on around CAs, and I think the more we can bring some kind of an assurance, I definitely am supporting this amendment. I think it's an opportunity to do so. Do have a question through you to staff on the timelines of the new board coming in and the old board moving out. So is this our last meeting, and just have a better understanding of our timelines?
Okay. Tracy, are you?
Yes, I was just gonna say that item is under our 6.2, our Board of Directors meeting schedule and transition and orientation plan, but
Okay, well, why don't we come back to it then?
Yeah.
We'll come back to that, Anna, and we'll deal with it then, hopefully. So anybody else then on the amendment?
Mr. Chair, if I could just add
Sure.
to that, I think it's really important that we, as board members and new board members coming in, just sort of understand the timelines and responsibilities. I think the more information we have, the better off we are. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So I got Paul and Marie and Tony. If anyone has comments on the amendment. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So if we could take a vote then on the amendment, and then we could have more discussion and a vote on the motion as amended. So I'm not seeing anyone else wanting to speak to the amendment. So I'm going to call for the vote on the amendment. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Murray Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you, folks. We've got that item dealt with. So we now have a recommendation here with an amendment added to it. And we'll go back to discussion on the item here. And Paul, you're first.
Thank you. As far as the letter that proposed to be sent to the premier, I don't have any problem with the wording in there. If the board wants to make it a little stronger, as Brian suggested, I would not be opposed to that. But I would make a couple suggestions as far as the CC list of who we send it to. And I would suggest that we add Matthew Ray, who's the MPP for Perth Wellington, since a lot of Perth County is in our watershed. I think he should be on the list. And we maybe should upgrade Monty McNaughton. He's actually the Minister of Labor, Immigration Training and Skills Development. And I know that doesn't impact what we're talking about here, but I think he's probably the most influential minister west of the GTA. And anything we can do to get his attention and perhaps get his support around the table at the cabinet might be worth a bit. The other thing is Zora Township is, as far as the report itself, Zora Township is applying for a delegation with the Minister of Natural Resources at the Roma Conference. And I want to thank staff for this excellent report. It's going to form the basis of our presentation with our concerns about municipal planning as the impact of this new legislation will have on municipalities such as Zora Township. And we would hope that other municipalities would ask for delegations as well, partly because there's no guarantee that Zora will get a delegation granted. And the other reason is if there's multiple municipalities bringing up the same issues and our concerns, we may have a little more impact. It appears the government doesn't want to listen to the conservation authorities. Maybe if we can go from a slightly different angle with the municipalities raising their concerns as well. So just my comments on both of those items.
That's good. Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you for noting those changes we need to make to the distribution list. We hard to keep everything current, but yeah, we should do that. So thank you. Next I've got Marie.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had some similar comments. I don't like to engage in last minute editing, but I felt that the letter could be stronger as well. So if you want to do some edits on that, I'd be very supportive of just making it a little stronger in our position. And the other comment that I had is I would suggest sending it to all of the local MPPs. I think they do know how we feel, but it's good that they can say we received these communications.
Okay, good. Thanks, Marie. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly I had concerns and still have concerns on how this relates to the PPS. And secondly, I'd like to echo what Director Petrie had mentioned about asking for an extension beyond the 24th deadline. I think that's imperative. One of the other conservation organizations that I belong to have also asked for an extension, but we need to be clear on why we want the extension. In other words, we want clarification on points and some response to our questions, I guess, as well. So anyway, I do think we need to include as an additional amendment for an extension beyond the November 24th deadline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I can get Tracy to comment here. I think Conservation Ontario and a number of groups have tried to get extensions and tried to get an opportunity to appear before the standing committee, but it doesn't seem like the province is willing to move on that at all. Any thoughts there, Tracy?
Yes, through you, Alan, to Tony. Certainly, I know the big sitting bears, that group, the first thing they did was, we need more time. We're just beginning our inaugural meetings. We haven't even had a chance to fully discuss these drastic changes yet. I think Amo's letter echoed the same thing. Many of the comments that we've seen have had that same suggestion about, we just need more time to better understand it and to re-engage working groups, whether it be with municipalities or, in the case of CAs, the multi-stakeholder working group, to fully discuss these changes and what consequences there may be. And those groups were very valuable the last time we had changes, which was just over a year ago. So, you know, there is a group there. Let's re-engage and let's have that discussion. So I can certainly can add that comment in about having an extension and having an opportunity for the working group to be re-engaged for the discussion. Great point.
Okay, good. Thank you. We're back to Anna. Anna, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for your comments. I don't want to probably be echoing all the comments that have been made, but I do agree we need a little bit stronger messaging going forward. I know we are holding a special strategic and priority committee meeting today, just before our council meeting, to deal with Bill 23. And one of the recommendations coming out is to really see how we can get these working groups going. I know in our letter we speak to the Conservation Authority working group, but OBCM in particular is calling on the government to look into the working group. I think it's HSAPT, something like that, that was set up. And I don't know if the Conservation Authority can align with that or what the difference is, but definitely extensions are needed. Sitting on the AMO board representing the City of London, we have been crying for extensions to be made, and of course to provide these opportunities for more of a fulsome review on how we can mitigate all these changes that are about to happen. I want to echo Marie's comments about passing on this letter to our MPPs here in the City of London. They represent, there's 3 of them, they represent the opposition, but I think it's really important that everyone gets to know what's going on. The more we talk about it and the more we can discuss the concerns, I think the more the public will have a better understanding as to what's going on. I don't know if anyone is close to Monty McNaughton's office or how we can do some outreach there, but I think he is an ear that we need in this area to get to, and hopefully he can listen to the concerns that are going on. And with that, I guess those are my comments. Again, we should come out a little bit stronger in our messaging. Thank you.
Yep, good. Thank you, Anna. Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would propose the wording that the board opposes the changes introduced in Bill 23 in the strongest possible terms. That's something that's similar to what other organizations have used. It's respectful, but yet it sends a clear message that this is not acceptable. I also think that maybe just sending it to MPs is still not a strong enough message. We need FaceTime. I would like to see if either Tracy, yourself, Alan, or myself request meetings with all area MPPs to discuss this situation. That's also another area. Letters are received and maybe not seen, and can be put on a desk and not really maybe listened to. But someone sitting in front of you gets the message a whole lot stronger if they're willing to meet and recognize that this is not just one conservation authority issue. It is a total planning matter situation, and it is also something that is extremely. This is going to have consequences for this government and other governments if they do not listen to the people going forward. Not just because people don't agree with the policy, but because the policy will fail in achieving its goals. I think that needs to be also stated in this is all under the roof of housing. We must show the government that this will not make housing happen faster within our watershed. That it is going to slow down building. It will not make development easier. It will not make planning easier. It will slow things down, and that we are doing what we should also be showing what we're doing to actually speed up development within our own policies and the working groups, and give them an alternative to that, which I know we have before, but that's something that is done. And also seeking, sorry, I forget the member's name who suggested clarification in what we're seeking. I think it was Tony. Because we need some clarification with what we can provide with comments, or can we still have an MOU with our municipalities that we provide information around planning matters to them? What's the government's intentions on this? Is this full stop, nothing coming from the authority? Are they allowed to hire planners? I'm sure municipalities are the same way. Where can we get this information? They have to provide in-house? Do they have to have consultants do it? Well, where are the consultants going to go? They're going to go to the conservation authorities because they have the information. So these are all things that I think the letter needs to be stronger in. And again, if we can get FaceTime with our MPPs, that's another way to push this forward a little bit stronger, because I really believe it's going to have to be the PC caucus that really turns this around at this point.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Some good points there. And I know Conservation Ontario, I know Angela Coleman was saying in an email that she has been spending a lot of time noting these points and meeting with MPPs and going down to Queen's Park and trying to point out this and asking for clarification. And as Tracy mentioned, there's some things we really don't know yet how it's going to unfold. and whether we can have MOUs that will, our municipalities that will allow for some of this. Still a lot of uncertainty, but we'll continue to try and get some clarity in all of it. I'm not seeing any of their hands up at the moment. I think we've had some pretty good discussion and some consensus that the board members would like to see a letter that's a little more strongly worded. And I don't think we need to engage in wordsmithing here and nitpicking over it as a board. I think we can leave that with staff to strengthen the wording a little bit, and then we can send that off and send it to an expanded list of MPPs, and make sure, as Anna and others have pointed out, that MPPs in the watershed are aware of our concerns. So I'm not seeing other hands or comments at all. I know this is a pretty tricky issue. I'd like to thank staff for all their hard work on this and trying to keep up with it, because it is changing almost daily. And as was pointed out, there may have been some changes yesterday at standing committee. It sounds like there were a number of proposals that were defeated, but perhaps there are some changes that will be coming. So in the meantime, I think we need to continue to apply pressure and push for those changes. Okay, I'm not seeing other hands or comments, so I'm going to call for the vote here then. We have the recommendation there before us. So again, this is a recommendation to approve. And it's amended. There was the additional point added on to this motion. And with that, I'll call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll call, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale. Sorry.
Yes. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Good discussion there. Lots of good points. So thank you, folks, and we'll let staff get to work on making those changes. So now we'll go back to item 6.1, and this is the 2023 fees policy and fee schedule. And if I could get Anna to move that, please, and Tony to second it. And this is to approve the recommendation as presented in the report.
I move.
And I second.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And yes, we did review fees a while back, and just a little while ago, we also reviewed the policy. You'll recall that a lot of CAs didn't have a policy in place, whereas we did. And in fact, ours was kind of used as a basis. It was sent to Conservation Ontario, and a number of other CAs were able to use it as a basis to develop their own fees policy. So that was good to see. And there are some changes in the RO postings related to Bill 23, and that may involve some changes to our fees policy and fee schedules. And so that's why, part of the reason why we're going to deal with this now that we've dealt with Bill 23 discussion. I'll turn it over to Tracy for some more comments.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. As I mentioned earlier, we are expecting our fees to be frozen on January 1st. Again, unclear if it's all fees for everything CAs do, or if it's just planning and development matters related to things under Bill 23. But in our comments back on the ERO posting, I just highlight that one of the things that we had suggested be changed, instead of just a discussion about all fees being frozen, that instead the CAs demonstrate to the province that permitting and planning fees do not exceed 100% cost recovery, and apply a criteria be included that identifies the maximum time period where fees would be frozen. Or that CAs be allowed to increase fees at an annual cost of living adjustment during the freeze period. So at least allow some flexibility there. and some demonstration by CAs that, you know, we're not exceeding cost recovery. It is the user pay principle. So we think certainly some clarification on fees is warranted, but unilaterally freezing all CAs fees is going a little bit beyond than what we think is necessary. So really, this is our regular annual fees review for all of our programs and services. We've certainly noted areas where we've updated fees to account for inflation or associated costs for the program. For example, if trees costs have increased, that's reflected in our recovery. But also there are some cases where we have reduced fees because we found some increased efficiencies, and those have been reflected in the changes in the schedules as well. So with that, I'll certainly pass it over any questions. If there's specific questions, managers are here to answer those questions in their departments.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. So we'll go for questions. And first I've got Paul. Go ahead, please.
I have 4 questions altogether, Mr. Chairman. First one is to do with the planning, and I'm looking for a bit of an explanation of what the role of the Upper Thames planning staff is for projects that don't require a permit. I think I understand what's involved to grant a permit, but if there's no permit granted, what work is involved?
Okay, maybe I can go down to Jenna for that one.
Sure, through you, Chair. So we certainly expect that our commenting role for natural hazards will continue. So on Planning Act applications, our planning staff will still be involved in providing review and comments to our municipalities. Typically, if a Section 28 permit is required at the end of a Planning Act application, our regulation staff are engaged in the process early on. And so that feedback is solicited throughout the planning process. And usually by the time planning approvals are granted, all of our requirements for our Section 28 permits have been achieved, and our Section 28 permits are issued fairly quickly after the fact. So I guess we've added this note that our planning fees would be doubled in the event that an exemption is made for the permit requirement at the end of that process. And that's to kind of reflect the involvement that we anticipate our regulation staff would still have in that Planning Act process without being able to collect the permit fee at the end, which is where we would account for that time typically.
Okay. Paul,
Okay.
carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. That explains that. We still got the same amount of work basically, but we're not going to get a permit fee at the end of it. So somehow we need to get some cost recovery on that.
That's our expectation.
Okay. My other 3 questions are conservation areas. I think they're fairly straightforward. Wet and dry dock fees increased from 9.8% to 21.6%, which is higher than most of the other fee increases. I just wondered why that is.
Okay. I'm just trying to think who we got here on staff.
We've
that
got
can
Brent.
tackle that one. Brent? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Paul. I'm going to pass some of this question off to Damien Scoville. He's our Conservation Areas Coordinator today. Before I do, I'd like to provide a little bit of context. So, in consideration for all of the conservation area fees, we really look at, what the annual fee comparison is telling us. And in addition to that, we have to have regard for the inflation while balancing our operational costs with user demand, all while considering those UTRCA environmental targets. So there's a lot of work that goes on in the background to take a look at these fees, and taking a look at the background in years past, it doesn't always paint the true picture. So with that, I'll pass it over to Damien, who can get into a little bit more of the details specific to the wet docks.
Okay, good. Damien?
Yeah, thank you. With specific, that fee applies just to Wildwood Conservation Area. They're the only of our 3 conservation areas that have wet and dry docks for patrons to use. And the reason with that we have such a range and increase in the fees for those this year is that the demand that the park staff are seeing for the use of both the wet and dry facilities, and then the upkeep maintenance costs to both those facilities with that demand, is that we have to account for some of that when we're raising them. That fee actually dropped quite a bit from what it was about I believe from 2010 to 2016. And so what they're looking at now is with the increased use of both those facilities over time is a little bit of that recoveries to allow for fixing wear and tear, replacement and stuff like that.
Okay, good to know. Paul.
Good. So it kind of comes down to supply and demand and cost recovery, all important factors. Third question, what's a seasonal site administration fee and why is it going up by 25%?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. What that fee is one that we initiated in our 3 parks back in 2014. And what that was for was that when we have people perhaps maybe giving up a site and then someone else maybe taking it over, whether it's going onto the site with new equipment or taking over the equipment that is present, what it allows us to do is it's a fee to help recover some of our staffing and operational costs and needs for transferring the site over. Since 2014, that fee hasn't been changed at all. It's always been kept at the same level. So recognizing some of the staffing cost changes and operational changes, that's why we decided this time that we need to raise that a little bit to account for that.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense as well. And the last one is, what constitutes a shoulder season?
That's a good question. I appreciate you asking that. This is something we discussed our unit meetings. What we're looking at is, in the past, we've talked traditionally about having an operating season. For us, that would be camping that would go from May the 1st until the Sunday after the Thanksgiving weekend. What we're looking at and what we're proposing is to initiate for 2023, only in the fall, is to have, after our campgrounds close for camping, so from that Sunday after Thanksgiving to about, let's say, the November the 30th, is having like a shoulder season fee. It would be a reduced fee to allow for the demand that we've been experiencing in day use. And this fee would just be only for day use purposes. During the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic has been exceptional, with people still coming to use the facilities. So this would allow us to still make sure we're, adequately able to provide staff to meet the needs of, garbage collection, risk management, occurrences sometimes that with the patrons on the property that are popping up, or, for example, could be, around what they're doing on the property, dogs off leash, those types of things. So that's what that shoulder season is. And our hope was that maybe in our park operations, that a shoulder season could start to develop where maybe we have a little bit of a window in the spring at some point, maybe in 2024. And we've been talking within our unit of, I guess, sort of a vision of, can we see our widening our season a bit broader than what it traditionally has been of just May to October.
Okay. Thanks for that. And what I got from those last 3 answers was that staff is responding to customer demand and changing things that haven't done in the past because the demand's there and there's potential revenue from it, and we're providing a better service. So thank you for those answers, and that's just good management. And thanks for doing that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Damien. Yeah, responding to the customer demand and responding a bit to climate change here. We've seen some great weather in the latter part of October into November, and people do want to get out and enjoy it. So good to see that staff are able to deal with that and have plans to continue to deal with it. Sandy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my questions are specifically to the planning and regulation fees. Just want to hear from staff what I think I already know the answer to, though, but publicly stating it, is that the report is in front of us not because of Bill 23. This was in progress well before we even heard about Bill 23. Is that correct?
Jenna?
Correct. So we undertake an annual review of our fees for planning and regulations at this time of year every year, and recommend increases based on what we anticipate our increased costs might be for the coming year. Again, to try and achieve our policy objective of a 50-50 user pay levy principle.
Right, and Mr. Chair, that's the other thing I wanted to, I'm glad Jenna mentioned it, is that it's 50-50. We are not recovering our costs and never have. That's not, just us. Certainly, I know municipalities do the same thing, but I wanted that to be clear. I also wanted to be clear that in terms of dollars and cents, the changes are not large dollars. The percentages may vary all over the place, but in terms of dollars, and we all have dollars in our pockets, not percentages. It's not a big part. After all, you may be interested in knowing that the construction cost indexes in Ontario have gone up in double digits year over year, both for residential and non-residential. So this is a relatively small part of that overall increase. And finally, the question was, if the Bill 23 impacts come into force and effect January 1st, is there going to be a significant impact on our budget that we're talking about next on our agenda today?
Tracy, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, certainly. I was waiting to see if Jenna wanted to jump into that, because speaking with most of our concerns with planning and development, I really don't see massive changes. As stated previously, our role is still very focused on natural hazards, and that role continues. Yes, we're able to supplement that with additional information and some staff time to also comment on natural heritage. In London, we haven't been commenting as thoroughly on natural heritage because they do have their own ecologists and hydrogeologists. But certainly in other areas of our watershed, we have been providing that service. So maybe some slight changes, again, depending on what that commenting role really is, or if it's still information that's being provided. Again, very limited impact on staff time, which is primarily our cost when we're talking about environmental planning and regulation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next we go to Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing, I just don't see a freeze on fees as being logical or practical, but I digress a little bit on that. One thing that I would like to see in the future, well, it may not matter to me, but for future boards, I guess, just the simplicity of putting a percentage change on the end of a column would be a great quick look at the numbers for review in the future. Anyway, rather than going through the numbers and figuring them out. Paul asked a lot of the questions that I had. But one thing that strikes me, and I experience this in my work world, is that we have surcharges on every shipment or all travel pretty much that comes in. And we don't have anything in our fee schedule for a surcharge for travel expenses. And I wondered if, obviously we pay mileage to people to travel. And on the same note, it costs money for us to go out to meetings, staff time to travel, and some travel is short distance, some is long distance. But I think a fuel surcharge or a travel surcharge in the fee schedule is not unreasonable given today's environment and climate. And unless I miss it, I don't see anything in our fee schedule that would include that. So anyway, just a thought, and I think it could be an amendment to the fee schedule. I don't think it's unreasonable, and I see it in every shipment that I send or receive in today's climate. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Tracy, any response there at all, or?
I'll see if Jenna wants to jump in on that one.
There's
There
Jenna.
she is.
Sorry, and I kind of missed that comment because I was typing to Tracy. We did notice a quick typo under site plan in Schedule 2.
Okay.
The fee schedule. So down at the bottom of Schedule 2, if you can see it, where there's a major site plan, our current charge is $3,000 and the proposed new charge is $320. It should be $3,200. So thanks to Tracy for catching that.
With regards to a fuel surcharge, I think in the past, we've always tried to capture that more in the regulations fees, recognizing that with regulations, the first step is usually a site visit to go out and see what's on site. So it hasn't been a separate surcharge, but certainly a component of regulations. With planning, there'd be times where planning staff would accompany site visits with our regulation staff. So it wasn't always necessarily a separate fee when a couple staff might be going out to the same property, given the complexity of the application through the planning process and then ultimately needing a permit. Again, now with Zoom and the opportunity for hybrid meetings, many of the planning meetings are not at our municipal offices. They're via Zoom or via calls, Teams and such. But certainly we can think about that. Jenna, I don't know if you have any thoughts about a surcharge for travel expressly to go out to meetings, recognizing that some site visits and meetings are closer to the office and others are much further away.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sorry through you, Chair. I don't really have much of a comment on that. We don't. I don't believe we have anything related to fuel in our fee schedules at the moment.
Okay, well, it's certainly food for thought. Looks like we, as Tracy said, we've been capturing some of that through our building into a component of the fees, and then hopefully now with technology we're able to reduce travel and travel costs. But certainly a good point that Tony raises, and staff can keep it in mind. And you know, there very well be a need to put that in as a separate item.
Mr. Chair, if I can just jump in quick. So the part of the reason behind a travel or surcharge as such is to try to encourage the use of technology, and keep in mind that all travel times, I won't say wasted time, because I know that some people can multitask, but certainly travel time where it takes you a half hour or an hour to attend a meeting and then return again is time that's lost and non-productive and generally not compensated for. So I think it kind of reinforces the idea of technology as a tool to deal with situations when possible, obviously.
Okay, good point. Thank you. I see Brent's got his hand up. Brent, are you commenting on this point here?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a quick comment from fuel, from the fleet management perspective. So when you talk about fuel and the use of fuel, it is incorporated in the overall allocations for each individual vehicle. And so when you're looking at operational costs for each individual unit, I think that's kind of tied in. And so I think it's a unique perspective, and I think it's something we can look further into, and with better data acquisition and management from the fuel perspective, it's certainly something we could look further into. But you know, when you mention planning and regulations and vehicles traveling to and from these different meetings, I think that could be applied across the board, whether it be planning and regulations, cottage programs, forestry, for all of what we do. And so I think those costs are buried right now. They're included in that fleet allocation for each of those vehicles and the use of those vehicles. And perhaps it's not really being appropriately distributed through that through the mechanism that we're currently using, the allocation. So just wanted to comment on that. I think the key is, as Tony mentioned, really, you know, focusing on the use of technology in the hybrid meetings and the virtual meetings better, and if possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thanks. Okay, now we'll move along here. I got some more hands up. So Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I noticed on the fee structure, there's obviously something called backcountry, no electricity costs and whatnot. And I know insurance and cleanup is also very important as far as a campsite after the fact when people have sort of moved out from the weekend. My question to you, however, and it's a difficult one to ask, but I will ask it since the Piddock Conservation Area is completely within the city of Woodstock boundaries now, and obviously it's 2,000 acres too. But Is encampment therefore a problem because people are paying money to backcountry camp with no electricity for $40 a day or $43 a day when some people are trying to camp for free? Is there a real problem with encampment in Woodstock? Just curious about that.
I don't know if Brent or Damien, who wants to talk about, do we have some issues with some people trespassing and camping on our properties? I'm assuming we do because it's happening everywhere else, but Brent?
Sure. Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Great question. I think that the two are completely separate for now. I think that the encampment issue is not a Piddock specific issue or a Woodstock specific issue. We're seeing it all across London throughout our conservation lands, through ESA lands, through City of London managed lands, and also within the Piddock conservation area lands. It hasn't to date been an issue in the location where our backcountry camping is, just given the nature of the geography of the park and the access. But encampments are a growing concern and issue through all of our lands that we're actively trying to work with our municipal partners on, the City of London, the City of Woodstock, Oxford County, and it's something that we're working towards. It's a larger problem, as we all know, and it's not as easy as moving in and cleaning up and trying to deal with the encampment itself. So,
okay. Any follow up there, Mark? No. Okay. Next, we'll move on to Brian.
There we go. I made it. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick recommendation. There was an excellent report put out by Guelph City staff on Bill 23. I forwarded that to some people. If other people want it, I'll gladly give that to them. One of the ways they're mitigating some of these changes, and it's possible with, I don't know if it's possible with our fee schedules being frozen, is that they're shifting from their fee schedule, because they know that these timelines are going to be hard to meet, the new proposed ones, that they're actually shifting that fee to pre-consultation, because that's where the work's going to be done, really, is in pre-consultation. So I don't know if there's a chance. I imagine it'd be all fees. It just wouldn't be for the permit fees that are frozen. But it's, again, because everything hasn't been clarified, there may be an opportunity to shift possibly some of our fees. I know it doesn't apply to this year, but we may be able to shift some of those fees to pre-consultation fees if we're allowed to change those, and get the work done there before the work comes into an actual final review, and that we're frozen in. But it might be just a food for thought.
Okay, thanks, Brian. The item we did include, this note, I think is trying to capture some of that if there's no permit, at least we are able to collect a fee for the consultation work, the stuff that happens up front. But I don't know, Tracy or Jenna, if you could want to comment on that further.
I'll say Jenna.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. Thanks. So when we did review our fees back in June, we did add a formal pre-consultation fee to our fee schedule. And that was something we really debated about for a long time, because we want to encourage pre-consultation, and we were worried that adding a fee for formal pre-consultation would discourage people from contacting us prior to submitting applications. Ultimately, we added it with the note that fee would be deducted from subsequent review fees once a formal application was submitted. So if you look at our planning fees, you can see that in there. And yeah, maybe we need to consider increasing that fee in light of the proposed changes. And I mean, even just the proposed changes through Bill 109 and how much municipalities are planning to do through pre-consultation to speed up the process.
And that's kind of my point there. I think that's where we're going to go see municipalities shift on how they're doing things, because they're not going to be able to, if they do switch to be able to meet it within the timelines, the staffing complement is huge, and the resources is huge as well. And of course, we're going to be expected to meet those timelines as well. And I think you're going to see a lot of them switch to that different type of system, a totally different type of system where everything is done before the permit is in, and the permit is more of a rubber stamp to say that it's done. So there will probably be more pre-consultation work that you're going to be seeing as far as permits goes, but just food for thought, and as a different alternative system.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Yeah, I think the staff were pretty forward thinking back earlier in the year, and we're going to have to continue to do that and try to keep on top of things here as the way we are able to do business and the way we're able to collect fees continues to be changed. So, Sandy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a technical thing. Do we need to formally make an amendment to page 14 of our agenda where the error in the amount is to change it from 320 to 3,200 for major site plan fee?
I don't think we need an amendment. I think it was just simply a typo, and if everyone's understands that and can make note of that major site plan is, it's not $320, it's $3,200.
Okay, just want to be sure.
Yeah, well, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate that, but I think we can make that typo correction.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands or comments. We've had lots of good discussion and lots of good ideas for staff to continue to monitor as we go forward. But I would like to thank staff because there's been a lot of work done on this, both previously in implementing our policy. I know we had a policy in place before and it was a good shape, but we had to make a few changes to that policy and have it updated. And now we're also having our annual update of the actual fees. So we do have the motion on the floor. I see Jenna. Jenna, you've got a comment.
Sorry, just before the vote, I did want to make sure everyone noted that we put December 31st, 2022 as the implementation timeline for these fee changes in light of the fact that our fees may be frozen come January 1st.
Right, good point. Yes. Yep. So hopefully everyone's, if they didn't notice that before, they're aware of it now. That yes, we certainly wanted to respond to the changes the province was implementing and make sure that we got our fees in place in time. Okay. No, I don't see any other hands there. Oh, Brian, did you have your hand up
Mr.
again?
Chair, I don't know if the board was interested just with how fast the government moves. They have moved to make things law before consultation is over. Is there any interest in moving up that date for implementation?
Tracy, any thoughts on that? I think because it was sounding before like they couldn't do that, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, everything that I've heard from was that it would be January 1st.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be a unique situation, but I would think that was very unlikely, given the timeframes for the consultation, other consultation pieces on the ERO. But yeah, like you said, it's hard to tell what this government might do, but everything we've heard has been directed to January 1st that the freezing will happen. Even though it's just proposed now, it is confirmed that that is the route that they're going to do.
Okay. That's good. I'm not seeing any other hands or comments then, so I'm going to call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Ruffle,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schattenberg,
Yes.
and Alex Westman, or Alan Dale, sorry.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. And again, thanks to staff and the board. Lots of good discussion there and certainly lots to consider, but good to have that in place. Next report we have is 6.2. And this is the 2023 Board of Directors meeting schedule, transition and orientation plan. Lots happened in 4 years. It's hard to remember back how we dealt with things 4 years ago, but good report there with lots of information. And the motion is to approve the recommendation as presented in the report. If I could get Sandy to move that, please, and Margaret to second it.
So moved.
Yes, I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, there certainly is going to be a lot of new faces around the board table, but hoping that a number of us will be back, and this gives us a little bit of an indication of how the transition is going to take place. So Tracy, anything you want to add at this point?
Yeah, I'll just circle back to the question that Anna raised earlier through the chair. And about, yeah, where we are right now. Much like municipalities have been experiencing this past month, it's a bit of a transition. We never have a meeting scheduled in December, and our January session is going to be focused on orientation for those new members, and really a training opportunity, and not where new business will be heard. We are certainly wanting to, both past and outgoing and new members to attend the January session, but with February, our AGM being our first new meeting of the year and the new board. So with that, the schedule, we looked at a few conferences that are typically attended by elected officials, Roma and Good Roads, and tried to avoid those dates. Hence the January orientation sessions a little bit later than we maybe would have typically had it. But it was nice to have a fifth Tuesday in the month to keep Tuesdays consistent anyway. And yeah, I just realized that we accidentally attached the CVA piece that was part of our budget package initially, but they got tacked onto the end of this report. But no need to look at that for any information that you don't already know. So anyway, with that, if there's any other conferences that maybe you're aware of that municipalities would be looking at, I'd certainly welcome any updates. So if there's something that's a conflict, we'll try to reschedule or work around that.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. We'll open up now for some questions. And Paul, you're first. Go ahead.
Two comments. First of all, I think the orientation meeting in January is an excellent idea. And I remember back 4 years ago when I was brand new to the board, and I did meet with Ian and Michelle, and they kind of gave me a bit of how things were run. And I attended the January meeting as an observer. But then minutes after I took my seat, I was had to vote on a very contentious budget motion. So I think anything we can do to orient people, especially new members to the board, is very valuable. And the other comment is I'm very happy to see that we're going to have the opportunity to meet in person in the new year. I've been quite frustrated personally that we're still meeting by Zoom. So I'm glad that we're going back to a more normal way of doing things. And I think that's especially important, as Alan just referred. We're going to have quite a turnover on this board. And if we're going to become a cohesive board quickly, we have to have that face-to-face engagement with each other, not only during the meetings, but those little conversations that we have before and afterwards to get to know each other and why we're taking certain positions and what's going on in our community. So it's been almost 3 years of sitting at my desk looking at a little screen, and I'm very glad to get back to what is some level of normalcy.
Very good. Thanks, Paul. Mark, you're next.
Yeah, I guess just a comment and then a question. First of all, as an FYI, our city council, our new city council for the city of Woodstock met with a lot of decisions we made about different councils or different committees last week. So I just want to let everyone know that I was nominated to continue my role in the UTRCA. But of course, in Oxford County, that's sort of a nomination that now goes to the Oxford County board to see if Oxford County Council will approve me to continue to be on the UTRCA board. So that's just a bit of an update. And with that in mind, considering we don't meet in December, I don't believe, but just want to know what's sort of the, hate to dare ask this, but the state of our wonderful chair, Alan Dale, as far as returning with the board and continuing his great works with the UTRCA board.
Oh, well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. But I guess I'm like you, I'm waiting for county council to see what their decision is. And we'll see who ends up being the new reps from the county of Oxford and from our other member municipalities. But certainly it's, if you look at the report here, we still are in place. So I'm still the chair, and I will do whatever's required right up until I'm, if I am replaced as a representative on the board. But hopefully we're going to have a quiet month in December. We've just been talking about this for the last little while about the province unveiling some more changes and not giving a lot of commenting time. And it's a time of transition, of course, because of new councils and new boards on the conservation authorities and coming into the holiday season. But hopefully it's not too eventful in December and we can make a smooth transition. And Tracy and Michelle, and I believe maybe some others, are also going to meet some one-on-one meetings with incoming board members as those appointments are ratified and we get to know who the new board members will be. And then, of course, we will have an orientation session with everyone in January. And as Paul said, it's always been an issue with trying to, you have an outgoing board that takes the initial steps in the budget, and then an incoming board that sort of joins midstream and has to get their heads wrapped around the proposed budget for the upcoming year and then make that final decision in our February meeting. So thanks for the comments, Mark, but we'll try to make the transition as smooth as possible, and we'll hope for the best. Anna, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a few questions, I guess, or maybe I'll start off with what's happening in the City of London. We did pick our boards, and we are requesting that 3 councillors, not 4 councillors, be appointed to Upper Thames, and with 1 public appointment. So there is a process in place. In fact, council is meeting this afternoon. I am going to have to leave this meeting shortly to attend a special SPPC meeting on Bill 23 as well. So it's going to be a busy day, but I just wanted to bring the board up to date with that. I also understand, and given our the item that we amended when it came to the provincial policy statement and getting information and who was responsible, I assume based on the recommendation in front of us that this board will continue until January 31st. Is that correct? Thank you. And also, I am looking forward to getting back virtually. I agree. I really do think, especially with a new board coming in, it is going to be important that we somehow connect to one another and during these challenging times ahead. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And yeah, and it looks like Paul, Mark, and Anna, looks like the 3 of you hopefully will all be returning to the board. So certainly wish you all the best going forward. And yes, you're going to be part of that group of veterans that's going to be meeting in person and working with new board members. So we'll be looking to some of you veterans to work with the new board members and help make that transition possible. So congratulations to the 3 of you, and we'll look forward to making the transition and getting the new board in place in 2023. Other comments or questions?
I'll just add that
Tracy?
we also received the appointment notice from Hugh being reappointed to our
Oh,
board.
very good. Okay.
I was waiting for Hugh to say something, but.
Well, congratulations, Hugh, because yeah, it was certainly, we always anticipate some turnover, but it's good to have some returning board members that are very familiar with the organization and can help guide us along. So that's great. And not seeing anything else there. So we've got the motion on the floor, and I will call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Ruffle,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. So that's carried. Thank you. And that moves us on to the next report, which is 6.4. And this is the 2023 draft budget approval. And lots of information in there. We got the package there for the board members. If I could get Paul to move that, please, and Joe to second it.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. So as you'll recall, we had some discussion. I guess we started back in September. We talked about some concepts and things. We gave some broad direction to staff, and staff have gone and started to work the numbers, and they've come up with a draft here. So it's certainly been difficult. I know Christine and the managers, they've been dealing with some new software to help make it easier, but it's still pretty hard to come up with the numbers to put into that software when you see changes coming from the province, when you see inflationary pressure. And so certainly staff have been quite busy, and I'd like to thank them for getting this budget put together. Tracy, I'll turn it over to you for some comments.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. And through you, I'll just highlight a couple of the items, but note that both Christine and the managers are also available to answer any specific questions. But since the draft budget was circulated, our operations side of things, there were a few notes that indicated that we were uncertain at this time, and it was related to a federal hazard information and mapping program. We had two proposals in for that program. We were successful in one of those programs, but not the other. So already we'll be updating this draft version to then look at how we can accommodate some of the work that was outlined in the second proposal. With regards to the capital budget, again, coming from some of the comments and discussions through the Finance and Audit Committee and looking beyond an annual capital budget and longer term. Certainly, we've had the flood control capital budget, the 20-year plan for quite some time, but looking at our other capital needs, and predominantly those capital needs are through our lands and facilities unit. Obviously, campground operations, but also our fleet and facilities that we're looking at those assets, depreciation, and how they need to be maintained. So what was been provided, what we're calling an expenditure registry. It's not a full fleshed out capital budget yet, but this is kind of the background work that we've put together so far to then further expand on our budgeting process and planning for those expenses in the long run, especially when we're looking at capital that we know we want to maintain. So certainly it's in a preliminary format. We'll be continuing to refine that as well with our capital flood control plans. Further discussion occurs between ourselves and our municipalities. We've put kind of all the costs in at this point, but that's just the starting point. And those conversations will be ongoing about what those needs are now, what maybe can be spread over the next year and a half or 2-year period, but certainly looking at what those needs are and then how we can work with our municipalities to accommodate those capital expenditures. So just a little bit of background with that, and certainly myself and our managers and Christine are able to answer detailed questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. And we'll start with Paul.
I have actually 5 questions, and Christine sent me some long and detailed responses to my questions. So I don't want to monopolize the meeting. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I'll ask the first 3 and then yield the floor and get back in line. I'm sure there's going to be lots of other people that have questions. So my first question, Christine, is first thing that jumped out at me was a 3% increase in wages. And I thought, well, how are you doing that? And I thought the options were that all employees are not going to get the cost of living increase, which at this point is around 6.7%, depending which month you look at. The second option was that we've got a lot of new employees who are replacing retired employees who the new ones would be lower on the pay grid, so would be some savings there. And the third option was where overall a reduction of the number of employees. And the fourth option was a combination of those factors or something else. So my question is, how did you come up with the 3% wage increase number?
Christine?
Thank you for the question, Paul, and thank you, Alan, for giving me a moment to speak. The 3% to the grid was proposed based on the information we received back from the board in September with regards to a potential maximum levy increase. In addition, we considered that a compensation review had just been done, and more importantly, we had to balance what the resources that we thought we had against what we need to do, and not give ourselves a projected deficit of millions of dollars for next year. We still see that we are going to have a deficit budget. We expect that. And we are not in a cash constrained position. We cannot increase levy to 30% or some phenomenal number like that. And we also keep in mind the fact that levy only contributes 40% to our total costs. So the increase to the grid, and it applies to everyone, the increase to the grid was set in relation to what other funding sources we have besides levy as well. So it is truly a very careful balancing act, and it would not have been affordable for us next year to cover a full cost of living amount, whatever that number you might set it at, and it does fluctuate. So that's how we came up with that grid number. Yes, we do have staff. Some staff have left this year. There have been some delays in new hires. Newer staff sometimes come on at a lower step on the grid than those who are retiring. And we had to also estimate the number of people we needed, all the FTEs that we would need to achieve the work for next year. So in fact, the FTE count is higher, or is planned to be higher in 2023 than what our last FTE count was for, that we reviewed in August. We also have those federal contracts that we had submitted back in September, and who do we need and what staffing do we need to fulfill those contracts? So they were included as well.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Paul, carry on.
Yeah, and thanks for that response. And I think it's kudos to the staff that they would even consider taking less than the cost of living increase that many unions and employees are looking for. And I know that's not the first time in our term that staff have done that. But I think you also noted in your report that this type of thing's not sustainable, partly because this did that review, which showed that we were behind and we had to do a lot of catching up. And we also, in the new policy, in 3 or 4 years, we're going to do another review. And if we're behind, then we'll have to do catching up then. So in the short term, I commend you and the other staff for the stance you've taken, but in the long term, it's not a sustainable thing. My next two questions are in the current capital expenditure, and they have to do with the EV charging stations. It's noted there's 5 charging stations for $125,000 over 2 years. Is that the total cost of the stations, or is that after the 50% rebate we qualify for from the government?
Christine,
yeah, that I believe is the total cost, and we may be able to enjoy a 50% reduction or grant from the feds if we proceed to put them in place.
So, like,
but we need to put in the total cost.
Right, yeah, because of all grants are, you think you're going to get them, but until you got the money, you can't
Exactly.
put it in the books. Okay.
Yeah.
And also, operation of these charging stations would they be free? Are we looking at 100% cost recovery, or are we looking at possibly generating some revenue from these?
I can jump in here.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, to Paul. These charging stations, it would depend on their location. So one charging station is proposed for the workshop, the mechanic shop, and that would be for combined use between the fleet management and franchise conservation area, while vehicles are down at the mechanics bay. The other station that's proposed for the WCC lot, which would be placing one level 2 charging station adjacent to the existing charging station. That would be for UTRCA fleet vehicles only, consistent with the one that's there right now. Now that may change. We haven't had a broad discussion as to how we could further promote or develop, our EV strategy. And the other charging station, which would be proposed in the visitors parking just south of the roundabout, south of the Watershed Conservation Center, that would be for visitors' use or public use. And so if there was to be one that would be proposed with fees, that would be the location of that station there. So, to be determined. We're just trying to get things in line so that we can take advantage and make the most of funding opportunities.
Okay, thanks for those answers, and I'll step aside and let others speak, and if necessary, I'll get back in line for my other 2 questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Next, we go to Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the draft municipal levy. And am I reading it correctly that in total, including capital investments, we're actually asking for a little bit of less from all the municipalities? Mind you, the major impact is because of change in structure investments in London, but it's actually a slight reduction. Is that correct?
Christine?
Yes, it is a slight reduction.
Okay, and since it's a reduction for London, it certainly would be less than what we had put in their multi-year budget. I assume we lose that funding and give it back to London, so to speak?
No, not exactly. The operating increase for London is
195, yeah.
Is 195, and that falls within the amount that was pre-approved by London.
Okay.
So what was approved by London did not have a consideration for capital projects.
Right? All right.
Yeah. So no, we didn't lose anything.
Okay. And final question, in the capital investment section, again, I'm looking at London, where there's a large decrease in the flood control capital levy for all structures. I'm trying to figure out what happened to the other $350,000 in 2022. I'm looking at the total structure City of London total for 2022, and the little box is smaller than in the main spreadsheet. Is there's something that was missing, or is that an error?
No, that looks very much like an error. And I would suspect it's erosion control. No, dikes. I'm just comparing this to the 2022.
Yeah. Can I leave that with you, because that may make a difference on your presentation?
Yes, you can leave that with me.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, 300,000 for erosion control. There it is there.
Oh.
Because we omitted erosion control for 2023, it looks like the number for 2022 of 300,000 disappeared.
Right. Okay.
That's it.
All
Good.
right.
Thank you. Thank you for spotting that.
You're welcome.
We'll correct that.
There we go. That's good. Are there questions or comments, Sandy?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm done.
Okay, good, thank you. We'll move on to Mark.
Yeah, I guess first of all, a statement and a question. I'll probably have two questions altogether, but I guess my statement being that the Woodstock has its capital budget meetings tonight. And the reason why that's important to our UTRCA board is the fact that 500,000 is in our budget for 2023 to bring in municipal services, so water and wastewater, to the day use park area, which would mean a future renovation of the bathrooms there in the day use park area by the beach, and that's of course on the north shore of Piddock Conservation Area. So basically in the conservation area itself, really. So it's a day use area that the municipal people can use for free, but obviously so can the campers use that park for free. So I wanted to point that out, that that's in our capital budget for next year, 2023, which of course is not approved yet, $500,000. So my question relating to that is then on the infrastructure for Piddock Conservation Area, it's noted for 2024, a $300,000 projection for municipal water servicing. So curious what that might be. If that's, is that a follow-up or a secondary after the city brings in water and wastewater to the day use park area?
Right, okay. Brent, do you want to, or who
Yes.
wants to tackle that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mark, great question. We've been communicating constantly with city staff, with Parks, Director of Parks, and with city engineers regarding this project over the past year. And so this project, I think, was on the books, or was hoped to be on the books for the city of Woodstock for 2022. It's been delayed to 2023. I know that city staff are keen and eager to get the servicing into the day use area at Piddock Conservation Area, so that in future years they can do those renovations to the bathroom facilities. And so just above that municipal water servicing piece for Piddock, the infrastructure outlines business plans. And so, you know, I think that's the critical piece here that we need to highlight, is that we don't have a business plan. And so for us to commit to or not commit to investing in servicing for Piddock Conservation Area, we don't have that information in front of us. And so Upper Thames staff don't want to miss out on an opportunity to piggyback on an opportunity to bring in servicing to Piddock, to Woodstock, that would bring in city water and sanitary services to support the existing campground infrastructure. Now, without that information, you know, the city's looking to move forward, and we don't have the information right now. And so we're trying to do our best to create a business plan and figure out what it is, the future of Piddock. And so is it continuing on with seasonal camping and day camp, transient camping as it is? Is it expanding on the land management program? There's a lot of options and things that we need to consider for Piddock before we commit to spending $500,000 or $300,000 rather to joining the City of Woodstock infrastructure project in 2023 or 2024. It may be on the books for 2023 for the city. We've been back and forth between 2023 and 2024 because we don't have a business plan in place for Piddock to be able to speak confidently in what the future of Piddock holds from our perspective. So I know the city hopes to have that in place for 2023. We will do our best to work with them in that regard, but I think our priority is really nailing down what Piddock looks like to us in the next 20 years.
And I guess my next question is, and I know you use a 5-year rolling budget, so we're only approving the 2023 budget, and 2024 is a projection with a hopeful expectation. But I noticed that the gatehouse building to be moved in 2024 is also a plan for the Piddock Conservation Area, and that would be a very good idea, especially with the activity of the day use area. Anybody that would go up there now would realize how many people have their cars parked, even either using trails that are on City of Woodstock property, or most certainly using the trails that are on UTRCA property, sort of down below where the gatehouse is for foot traffic is phenomenal, really, how many people are using the trails.
Yes, through Mr. Chair, to Mark, that's a great point. And you know, we've heard loud and clear that the city wants to continue with their infrastructure project, but more importantly, they really want to see that gatehouse be relocated down to the bottom of the hill. And I think it would serve both the city and the Upper Thames well in each of our respective operations. And so that's the other piece we're trying to balance is, you know, where do we invest? I think the elephant in the room is that we haven't invested in years in any of our CAs. And so the intent of this, I suggest, would be to kind of capture some of those large costs that we're looking at in the next 5 years. And with respect to Piddock specifically, where is it that we want to, focus our capital efforts and planning? Is it, joining the Woodstock in this infrastructure build, or is it focusing on the actual gatehouse that would serve our operations well and serve the city of Woodstock land management arrangements quite well? And so I think that business plan again is key to kind of guide and inform where we're going to be doing our spending at Piddock Conservation Area. So, but regardless, the gatehouse is something that's on our radar, and that's maybe more of a focus for us, but certainly need to consider that infrastructure piece. And so hope that helps.
Okay, any follow-up at all, Mark? Or?
Yeah, no, I just want to say, Alan, for anyone who doesn't maybe know the lay of the land there, the Piddock Conservation Area is obviously large on the north side of Piddock where the campsite is. And then there's a train track immediately there. But on the immediately north side of the train track is what we now call the Sliver Trail. So that's not on UTRCA property, but people park at that gatehouse to utilize the Sliver Trail, which has become very, very popular, and a very nice bridge and stuff like that over a little wetland area in there. And so it's growing along that subdivision that's growing there as well. So it's been a very popular trail, like I say, both in the UTRCA lands and north of the UTRCA lands, what we call the Sliver Trail, which is really runs parallel to the train tracks that are there.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well, it's good. Thanks. And yeah, it's great to see increased use in that area, but with increased use, of course, you have increased demand for parking and washrooms and everything else. So it's, as Brent says, it's just an idea of it's a matter of getting together a business plan and seeing what's the future of the park's going to be. So, okay, that's good. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things I noticed that under EV charging stations, there doesn't appear to be any plan for Wildwood or Piddock, only for the London location. So trying to understand that, I guess, a little bit, and rationale for that, or have I missed something somewhere? Secondly, it's always been my understanding that all costs for the facilities of the parks, such as Piddock, Wildwood, and Fanshawe, are not covered through our general levy to the municipalities, but there's a lot of money in this infrastructure section here for these locations. I just want to be sure that those expenditures are not included in the general levy for the municipalities. And I believe I had one more question, but it's slipped my mind right at this point. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, let Brent respond to your first questions and see if you come up with the other one.
Yes, thank you, through Mr. Chair Stoney. There hasn't been any specific reference to including any EV chargers at Wildwood and Piddock at this time. Recognizing that there is grant money available that we would need to match at 50%. I mean, we can expand the 125,000 to 200,000 and take advantage of those grants. I think that would be worthwhile. But I think what really we need to take a look at is where are our EV vehicles and where are those vehicles in our fleet and where are they primarily located? And so currently with the parks operations, typically they operate with full-size pickups, and the EV technology and full-size pickups is not something we've been really contemplating at this time. Again, going back to the green fleet strategy, it needs work, and we'll focus that again on that next year. But most of those EV vehicles would be located in London for use by other departments outside of the CAs. So that was the kind of the primary reason to focus on investing in London at the WCC and at the mechanics workshop there.
However, we've missed the visitor parking at Wildwood and Piddock for electric vehicles.
Yes, yeah, we do recognize that we have missed that there. It's certainly something we can explore if that's the direction we want to go.
But it's not the visitor parking for the campgrounds that you're talking about at Fanshawe. You're talking about at the conservation center, at the offices, right?
It is specific to the watershed conservation center, but certainly there's a lot of visitors that do frequent Fanshawe Conservation Area that would use that facility. So I think it's something we can certainly explore and look at investing into the different CAs. But with all due respect, there's millions that we need to spend, and we need to focus and prioritize our efforts. And I guess that starts with business plans and asset management plans, and where can we really focus our capital needs. And within the CAs, if we were to speak to the superintendents and those that are running those two CAs, if they were to choose from an EV station versus some facility improvements, I think that we'd certainly focus our efforts in different areas. But it's a challenge. There's lots of things that we can invest in, and until we get those business plans and asset management plans, we're doing the best that we can.
Okay.
Sorry, question 2. The facilities that are not being included within the general levy. So no, all of these improvements that are specific to conservation area operations or campground operations, as it's outlined in the new regulation, category 3, those costs would they're being proposed to be borne through conservation area specific reserves. Now, I think that we really need to realize that a lot of what our conservation areas, specifically Fanshawe, some of the operations and the capital improvements that you would suspect be specific to Fanshawe, it's not necessarily Fanshawe in itself. It is the upper Thames. People come to the building, and so what's really been directed to Fanshawe staff and Fanshawe conservation area operations and capital certainly could be considered land management in the future. So,
okay. And I did recall the other question I had. So both 3-4 years ago, we dealt with electrical upgrade requirements for Wildwood Conservation Area. But again, I see electrical upgrades listed for infrastructure projects at $320,000 for Wildwood. Can you explain that to me? Did we not do the electrical upgrades that were required at Wildwood when it was approved, or what's this about?
Sure, certainly, through Mr. Chair, Tony. These electrical upgrades that were a result of our ESA inspections and our CSS program that we have with the ESA, they've identified the need to upgrade all of our existing infrastructure for seasonal camping at all 3 of our CAs. And so we've been working closely with the ESA to come up with a plan and how we could prioritize, and without spending $2 million or it's an arbitrary number, but a large sum of money in all of our CAs to upgrade all of our electrical services. The ESA suggests that do what you can year over year, and this is what we thought was reasonable, and we've worked with the ESA. And so what we've done is really try to prioritize where can we as an authority get best value or return on these improvements. And so Wildwood being a conservation area that generally speaking has mostly 30 amp service, whereas Fanshawe, generally speaking, has a number of 15 amp service. We're focusing on trying to upgrade those 15 amp services to meet the ESA requirements and upgrade them to 30 amps and 50 amps as trying to get best value for this capital improvements. So we focused on,
sorry, go ahead.
So we focused on Fanshawe conservation area for the first few years. There is nothing in the 2023 column because there was plans to continue on this program in 2022, but the work is still underway. It hasn't been tendered. It is not going to be done in 2022. So the money that was approved, to my understanding, a couple of years ago, the phase 2 of that project that was to be completed in 2022 is being deferred into 2023 to meet that requirement.
So we should also anticipate that this is only another step to completion. So what are future projected costs for completion for each of the conservation areas?
Sorry, what's the question, Tony?
So for Wildwood, for example, you referred to the 30 amp services, but that's not going to include all electrical services at that location, correct?
So what the ESA requirement was for seasonal camping is to relocate the pedestals, the receptacles for seasonal camping in each site. So currently the location of those pedestals is at the back of the site, and the ESA has suggested that the cord length is not to current code. And so what they're asking of us is to relocate each individual pedestal for seasonal campsites to be within a certain distance from where those trailers are being parked. So effectively, most all seasonal campsites throughout the Upper Thames campgrounds will require this upgrade throughout. And so I can't give you definitive costs on what that will take or how long that will take to complete this project. It's going to take years. to complete it. We're doing one section at a time, and there's a number of sections. Ballpark would be 10 years, 10, 15 years to complete all of this work. So that's, again, it goes back to that business plan and having an asset management plan that's lacking from 3CAs. It's crucial, it's critical to really prioritizing where we're spending our money. The ESA has also suggested that if, in any given year, 150,000 cannot be committed to for ESA improvements, there could be less amount that would be dedicated or committed to the ESA improvements as well.
So this is ongoing for sure then.
Absolutely.
Okay, good to know. And certainly, I think the demands of most campers, they require more electricity than perhaps they did in the past. And we need to come up with meet current codes. So it's, as Brent says, a lot of work to do there, and it's going to take a number of years. Brian, you're next.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I strongly support the business plans. I think that's really smart. Again, a lot of my questions when I was reading the numbers came, okay, where's the business plan for this? Where's the justification? I hear it's coming, which is good, because of course, if we're going to spend millions of dollars on something, there needs to be a plan on return on investment. With the water, we're going to probably see what do we have an annual cost of what it takes to keep our system running at this point with all the pump houses and testing and everything like that? If not, that's okay. There's obviously a cost there that's going to be associated with that, which will help pay back for the cost of upgrading those, which is it may be 10, 20, 30 years, but at least it will be more of on a payback schedule there to offset that cost. When it comes to the total budget, I appreciate staff's effort to try to incorporate all the changes that we are seeing and the changes on how we operate. It's certainly a transition budget. And we're going to see that even more in the next budget. So I'm sure we'll get some excellent feedback from municipalities. Some will be happy, some will be have more questions than others, which we usually do. But I think it's a good starting point on where we hop out into more discussions for the final adoption of a budget. But and we'll get some more information. We'll probably, I'm sure, like most years, we'll have to do an updated budget throughout the year anyway, just to concur with what's actually happening. So I can certainly support this at this time.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Marie, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just had kind of a general comment about the budget. This will be the last budget that I get a chance to look at. And I do note that I am supportive of it. And I do note that it is a transition budget and largely due to factors outside of our control. But I also note that it notes that it's at the expense of our long-term strategic goals. And I find that really sad and disappointing. And I expect that probably won't change next year either. But I do hope that those goals aren't lost sight of. I know in the past I've been concerned about deferring the levy for those goals, because I thought once we start deferring it, it'll get deferred forever and we'll never reach our goals. And to the extent that a budget is a plan for the future, I just strongly encourage whoever's on the next boards to not lose sight of those goals, because they were very farsighted and exciting and really look to the future rather than just kind of holding the status quo. So I support the budget, but I'm a little disappointed in the direction that it's sort of being forced to take.
Thanks, Marie. You stole a little bit of my thunder there, because that was when I got on this board, I sat down with Ian and we talked about the environmental targets, and I thought that's pretty exciting stuff. I was really impressed with what the staff had put together and what the board was looking at, and we haven't quite got there. We got part of the way. This board did a lot, and it's going to be up to those of us, whoever's around the next board, and for staff to not lose sight of those targets and see what we can do to to see that they get implemented and expanded upon. So thank you for your comments. And Paul, we're back to you.
Okay, my last two questions. On the chart for flood control maintenance projects, it shows that the Centerville Dam, the Dorchester Mill Pond, and Fanshawe Dam, and part of the Embro Dam are going to be funded from reserves, and the other projects are all funded from flood control levies. And I wonder why the difference.
Flood control.
Okay. I don't know who wants to tackle that, Christine, or is this?
Maybe Chris Tasker?
Okay.
Yeah, Christine actually put some comments together and passed them along to Paul in advance of his question, and I'll just reiterate those that in general terms, where we have healthy reserves, we tend to use those to buffer large fluctuations in project costs. In areas where those reserves are not quite as healthy, it's necessary to levy to undertake that work.
Okay, that makes sense. And yeah, certainly some of our minor structures won't have the necessary reserve funds to support them. Paul, carry on.
Yeah, last question. Thanks, Chris, for that. My last question is, I think, strictly an accounting question, and that's on page 54 of the agenda, which is the operating budget. My question is depreciation expense included in the expenditures for each mission cost center, which results in a cash surplus when the total depreciation is subtracted from the calculated or from the operating deficit?
Christine, that's one for you.
Definitely, that's my question. So Paul nailed it. At the bottom of that green bar, it shows that we are anticipating a deficit of 633, right? About 4 or 5 lines up from the bottom, 633. We do plan on flood control side to use up some reserves that we already have, and we plan to put a little bit back into reserves that we're going to be levying in 2023. The net effect to the organization, therefore, is 955. So because we include depreciation in all those mission cost centers for all the assets that we have invested in the past, so depreciation expense is what's there based on past capital spending decisions. It's all there in the mission cost centers. If we were to extract that effect, that 1.169 number, second line from the bottom, if we were to take out the effect of that depreciation, we would therefore add back that number to the 955 deficit. So on a cash basis, because depreciation is the result of all past decisions, and it's not an expense that requires cash today or in 2023, we'd end up with a cash surplus. Okay. Cash surplus of 536. That's the 633, negative 633, adding back the 1.159 of depreciation that we were going to experience in 2023. So we have cash. Even a deficit budget can generate cash because we have over $1 million worth of depreciation expense embedded. So you're right with that, Paul. It's there. And we do budget for it. We plan for it. It's a significant expense of our annual operating costs.
Okay,
Thanks.
very good. Paul, any follow-up?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. And yeah, when you look at a budget of this size and complexity, it can be overwhelming. And so I try to pick out some of these details so I can, after this is the 4th one I've looked at, I'm getting more and more understanding of how this all works. And so thanks to everybody for their answers today. And thanks, Christine, for the detailed email you sent me last night. It certainly opened my eyes to quite a few different things. So thanks.
Okay, no, that's true. It's a lot of information there in the budget. So hopes board members had a good opportunity to review it, and you can continue to review this and come up with more questions as we as we move forward towards that final vote in the new year. So I'm not seeing any other hands or hearing from anyone. So if there's no further discussion on the budget, we have the resolution in front of us there, the recommendation. Approve the recommendation as presented in the report. And I'm not seeing anything, so I will call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Sorry, just before I do that, I just wanted to confirm the mover and seconder. I'm not sure if I missed it. I know Anna Marie's
I
not.
think Paul
here.
moved it and Joe
And
seconded it.
Joe seconded, thank you. Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins. Oh,
think
sorry,
that-
Anna's
yeah,
left. Anna left
yeah.
the meeting at 11:03. Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alex Westman.
I don't think Alex is
Alan
not
Dale.
with us.
Sorry, every time. Alan Dale.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. Yes, and thank you to Christine and all the managers. Appreciate there's a lot of effort goes into putting this draft budget together, and thanks for all the comments and questions from board members and the responses from staff. Okay, that moves us down to item number 7, reports for information. 7.1 is the administration enforcement. That's our section 28 status report. If I could get Brian to move that, please, and Jim to second it.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. And we've got Jenna and staff here to answer any questions. And again, good to see that information about the number of permits. Permit numbers are up. Staff have been busy and done a great job of making sure that just about all of those permits were dealt with within the new client service standards that we've worked with Conservation Ontario. So I'll open up for comments and questions. And Sandy, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on that second paragraph in that 227 have been assigned with 168 issued. So certainly I know the timing of when a permit application comes in and when it gets issued makes a difference. But is there any concern we're hearing, particularly from London's industry, about the 60 permits that haven't been issued, or the nature of them? I guess I'm trying to get at. I know complicated ones are going to take more time, and usually we get blamed for delays that may not be our fault, but just trying to check in to see if we're meeting the timelines on the complicated ones as well as the straightforward ones.
Okay, Jenna?
Great, yeah, through you, Chair. So we have been in discussion with the London Development Institute about those permits that haven't been issued yet and providing some more information in the report about those permits. So I am looking at ways to include that additional information. Right now, we don't have, that's not captured in our kind of reporting system that we use to complete this report each month. So I am looking at ways to try and pull that information together. But yeah, as you point out, Sandy, a lot of that has to do with delays and information we're requesting. So it's not necessarily on our end, or people start a project, but they're not ready to move forward and receive a permit yet. So there's a variety of reasons. Occasionally it is on our end where reports have been submitted and we're having technical staff review, and we do experience some delays in some of our review times, certainly, but there's certainly a variety of reasons for why our permits may be delayed. And again, I'm working on trying to bring some of that information into our monthly reports for the board.
Thanks. And then hopefully other CAs are doing that as well, because I get the impression some of the changes in legislation are due to information that may only be coming from one source to the government. And hopefully we're getting our message across that we are not to blame in every case. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jenna. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so I will call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Thank you. That's carried. And we'll now move down to next. We have 7.2, which is the FYI report for November. And if I could get Joe to move that, please, and Mark to second it.
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
Good, thank you. Lots of great information again in the FYI, an update and sort of some wrap-up comments about the Celebrating Natural Connections events. We've talked about those the last few meetings, and lots of other activity going on in our education programs and outdoor activities. So that's great to see. I've said it a few times before, and I'll say it again. A lot of staff helped with those events. I think people are glad to be back outside, as we've talked about people getting together in person and people going to public events, people getting out and doing whether it's outdoor education or tree planting activities. And so it's good to see. And certainly we have some staff that have been out all summer long. They've been doing work in the field, and some of that is wrapping up for the season, but certainly lots going on with the organization. Any comments or questions all on the FYI report? Did you have anything you wanted to add at all, Tracy?
Through you, Alan, I just wanted to highlight the thank you to the board that is also included in the FYI. Certainly your contributions and dedication have been instrumental to our success as an organization. I know there's always some regrets. We haven't maybe gotten done as much as we wanted to, but given the circumstances, I think we've really done well. And just to extend, as an organization, how much our staff appreciate the support that this board has provided over the last 4 years. I hear that over and over again. Oh, we're so lucky to have such a supportive board that is truly here for the environment and for inspiring our healthy environment in our watershed. So just wanted to make sure, if you hadn't looked at the FYI in detail, we wanted to kick it off by a thank you to you guys. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. And Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just a statement of thanks and congratulations to the UTRCA. I know we talk lots about tree coverage and healthy environments by having more tree coverage. And I noticed there was a nice report in the FYI about additional trees added along the Piddock Lake area, which of course is the Thames River. Thanks.
Yep, well, that's good to see. Good to see. Any other comments or questions? I don't see any, so I'll call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. And that's carried. Thank you. Item number 8, notices of motion. Does anyone have any notices of motion to bring to the floor for a future meeting? I don't see or hear anything. That takes us down to item number 9, which is chair's comments. Just a couple of items. I wanted to mention that Conservation Ontario was planning to have a council meeting in December. We've decided to make some changes, though. We are going to have a listening session next Monday, and this is just related to Bill 23. So we've already had lots of discussion today about Bill 23 and the impact that we see that it may be happening to conservation authorities and municipalities. And we felt that this was a better use of our time because so much is happening quickly, that we would respond by having an update specifically on Bill 23. And then the day that was actually scheduled to be the CEO council meeting will actually just be a meeting for the general managers, for them to deal with Bill 23 and continue on their follow-up and response to that. So Conservation Ontario is trying to respond and trying to be very strategic about how we spend our time and responding to what the government is introducing. So I hope that helps explain things a little bit. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that these changes, it feels a bit like waves on the beach. It just keeps coming at you. We've dealt with a lot over the last 4 years, and we kind of think we're kind of through it, and we can kind of things will stabilize a little bit, and we'll deal with what we've got and make necessary changes. Well, then suddenly more changes are on our doorstep, and it's certainly a lot of upheaval and transition, and it makes it difficult. We've talked even about budgeting, how it's difficult to plan because we really don't know necessarily about how the MOUs will be structured, and we still have some uncertainty that things that are maybe a category 1, 2, or 3, it sounds like maybe there'll be some more changes down the road, and things that we thought we were going to be doing, we won't be doing. So it's certainly a lot to deal with. I've been reading lately Thomas Homer Dixon. I believe I heard him a number of years ago at the Laternal Conference. He's been teaching at University of Waterloo for the last number of years, and his latest book is Commanding Hope. He talks a lot about this uncertainty we're experiencing these days, and change, and how some people feel a little hopeless and helpless. But he's trying to get his idea that we need to figure out what we can do. We need to have hope, but we need to actually change that into something positive and take action, and how we can make changes in the way that we are primarily responding to changing climate and environmental issues. So I've been taking a little bit of inspiration lately reading this, and feeling a little bit better about how we can continue to respond and give our perspective on what we feel is necessary for as we say in the Upper Thames, inspiring a healthy watershed. Because we got to keep coming back to that. It's part of the rationale of this organization is safeguarding the river system and our natural environment, and inspiring a healthy watershed. And then last night, of course, Saudi Arabia comes along and defeats Argentina, so that gives you that little glimmer of hope that anything is possible. You just have to keep working hard and persevering. So thank you for indulging me in those comments. Do any of the members have any comments they wish to share? Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we'll get into this at the next meeting, but I really do want to share. My wife and I were at a gala the other night, and someone asked me, like, they know I love serving on committees. What's your favorite and least favorite committee? And my wife laughed because she knew I was going to say, well, they're all my favorites. But because I really do love it. But when it came to Upper Thames, I explained to them that Upper Thames has given me an opportunity to serve with people of an extreme caliber. And I know we're going to have new board members come on But the citizen appointees that have served on this board, and hopefully some will continue, it's been a highlight of being on this board, and it's really a shame that the government's not taking that into account, that the level of expertise, the level of commitment that those members bring. And so I want to thank those people for stepping forward and putting their name forward and serving on the board. You'll truly be missed for sure. And I know the new people coming on will have different perspectives, but they certainly won't have the expertise or the knowledge that you bring to the table. So thank you for stepping forward and doing that. And I'm sure there'll be more accolades, but I just wanted to do it now before we had a room full of people as well, because it's extreme, huge honor. I have no qualifications to be here. I dropped out of high school, had to go back, but to serve with people who've had positions such as yourselves, and the knowledge that you shared is absolutely amazing. You bring immense value to the board. It's a little bit ironic as well that the government says that municipalities can't appoint citizens because they're not elected officials and responsible for money, but they're now proposing to do the exact same thing at the very upper tiers of regional government. So a little bit ironic, and yeah, I'd like to hear their rationale for that one. But anyway, thank you for putting the time forward.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Other comments? I'm not seeing any, so that takes us down to general manager's comments. And Tracy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alan, and through you. Just a couple of things. Something showed up on my desk this morning in a file, and it actually had a note on it from Karen Pugh. So I was expecting a prank, but really I opened it up and found some interesting correspondence. And the title is from the London Free Press, Endangered Spaces, Conservation Authorities at Risk. Well, you would think this was from, last week. No, this was actually from Saturday, March 2nd, 1996. So when Alan was speaking about, waves, this is just, in my mind, another wave in the storm that CAs have managed to navigate through. We've been fortunate that there's so much within our community that recognizes the important work we do. And I hold on to that as being an optimist, recognizing that these waters have maybe been a little rough since the mid-90s and in different stages of government. Some storms have been easier than others. But I really do feel that this may change our direction and how we navigate, but in the end, we'll still maintain what we have and continue to contribute what we do to the natural environment. So with that, I just wanted to bring that to people's attention and recognize that this is our last meeting before the holidays. It's hard to believe in my mind with all the nice weather we've had. I'm not quite in the Christmas mood yet, but certainly recognize that many of you will be celebrating with family and friends over this holiday season, and wish you all the best during this time.
Very good. Thank you, Tracy. And we have nothing today for closed session meeting. So that takes us down to item number 13, which is a motion to adjourn. So Marie, it's up to you. Would you like to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, I would. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you. We are adjourned, folks. I appreciate it. And just to echo Tracy's comments, I'd like to wish everyone the best of the upcoming holiday season, however you celebrate. Hope you are able to enjoy some wonderful, relaxing times with family and friends. So take care, everyone, and we'll look forward to talking to you in the new year, if not before. Thank you.